Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our International Women's Day Conference. I'm Carolyn Cawley, and I'm president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. At the Foundation, our mission is to engage the public in how business does well, does good, and prepares for the future. And I'm delighted and privileged today to introduce you to two really accomplished, inspiring women who are doing all three of those things. One of them is CEO of an iconic 100-year-old brand that you know very well, National Geographic and the National Geographic Society. The other is president of a company you may not know so well, but you definitely should. Transurban is a $30 billion company headquartered in Australia. And if you live in the DC metro area, their roads are getting you to where you need to be. So let's get started with our first guest, Pierce Coffey. Pierce is the president of Transurban North America. And what that means in layman's terms is that she's changing and improving how we move people and goods around our area. And thanks to her work on faster, safer, more efficient commutes, ultimately we get to spend more time with our friends and families and things that are meaningful to us personally. Transurban was recently named to Fortune's 50 list. So let's find out more about that. Pierce, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Carolyn. So glad to be here.
Well, Pierce, as I mentioned, you're running Transurban North America, and you're developing big toll roads. And I can imagine that there is a lot behind that. There's the financing piece, the construction, the development. What are some of the things that we should know about the company? And I'm also curious, what drew you to the business?
Sure, as you mentioned, Transurban's a global infrastructure developer and operator. We've got toll roads in Australia, Canada, and here in the US. And we're really a transportation company with technology at its core. 40% of our employees are in a tech-related job. So what we do, Transurban combines the traditional concrete and steel infrastructure with the latest technology, as well as financing tools to provide our customers faster, safer, and more reliable travel choices. So here in the US, what we've been doing is developing and operating a growing network of express lanes across Virginia and now moving into Maryland. For those of you not from the area, these express lanes are dynamically priced, which means we're changing the toll price in real time to keep people moving at steady speeds in the Washington area, which is a little bit unheard of. So for us, really, it's about how do we actually partner with governments to deliver solutions that are going to get people moving again. And when I think about what attracted me to the business, to your second part of your question, Carolyn, I've been with Transurban in a number of different roles across our global business for more than a decade. And beyond my future boss at the time, who is a fabulous female executive, the initial draw to the company was really that the company was trying to take and do new ways to solve old problems. I was really attracted by our use of technology and the concept of the express lanes, and that could fundamentally change how people could move around a single region.
I love the idea of new solutions for old problems. You know, a term that we hear a lot at conferences like these, and certainly around Washington, is the term public-private partnership, PPPs or P3s. I know that they're really fundamental to the way that you work at Transurban, but talk to us about how you view public-private partnerships and what they reflect about your leadership style.
Sure, I think, PPPs or P3s can have varied meanings across different industries, but I think at their core, they're seeking to bring the best of the public sector and the private sectors together to be able to deliver expanded benefits to the communities. So for Transurban, that means we're partnering with state governments to finance, deliver, and then operate billions of dollars in modern infrastructure or transportation solutions. And for our government partners, that frees them up to be able to divert its limited public funds to other critical needs. So our approach we take with P3s at Transurban is structuring our partnerships to meet specific policy objectives of our partners. We have decade-long partnerships, right? 50 years in some cases, 50 plus in others. And so we're really structuring our partnerships to meet evolving needs of the communities we serve. Let's take Virginia, for example. We've been working in Virginia since about 2008 as we were developing the 495 express lanes. One of Virginia's key objectives is around transit and carpooling. So the 495 express lanes introduced the very first carpooling incentive on the Capitol Beltway. And as part of our 395 express lanes extension project, we committed to $15 million annually over the life of a 50-year agreement. So just over the last 3 years, our projects have provided $45 million into the transit in this region, whether it's for expanded bus services, fleets, or commuter parking lots along our corridors. If I look at my trajectory within Transurban, many of my roles have been customer or community facing. So making sure that we think of that in our partnerships and what do our stakeholders care about and understanding their needs is really critical to me and my leadership team as we're working with state governments to solve transportation problems.
That's so interesting. Is there an example of work that you did with a community that really kind of showed up in the final project?
There's probably there's a lot of examples of us being in the community where if we were impacting with a construction standpoint, replanting of trees or doing a new garden at a school in the catchment area so kids could learn about growing fruits and vegetables at the school property. And then I think there's also with the business community and the government stakeholders, the 495 express lanes, which are right outside of Washington, D.C., they have a connection to the first ever private road, which actually leads into the Tyson's Corner Mall. Because when we were working in the development of the project, feedback from the community was we don't want any more exits or entries at 123, which is a very popular corridor here in Northern Virginia. And so we sat down and we worked with the businesses and the government relations, like the stakeholders of the government, and we changed where the locations of the exits would be, which really allowed people coming in and out of the Tyson's corridor to have more options. I think the engineer at the time described it to me as putting more plugs in the bathtub so you can remove the water out faster. So we really try to work with the communities on small scale things like our grant programs through to how do we actually design the best possible solution to move the most people in the most efficient way.
That's so interesting. It sounds like listening is such an important part of your job.
Absolutely.
I want to turn to a minute for workforce. You know, here at the Chamber and at the Chamber Foundation, it's what we're talking about every single day: skills, the worker shortage, diversity and inclusion. It's the concern for all the leaders today. And when I read a little bit more about the transportation industry, I was interested to find that women make up about 15% of the workforce. But the picture at Transurban is quite different. How are you changing that?
You're right, Carolyn. It's quite different. Across our global business, we're really proud as a company that across our group, we've achieved 42% representation by women and 50% at our global executive committee. So both of those, as you just said, are a lot higher than the industry standards. And I think that's really because we have an entrenched commitment to that equity, whether through recruitment, retention, or training. And we also make sure that we're measuring our metrics are also aligned to the communities where we operate. So it's through a series of different programs, right? We do things like a review of pay equity gap every single year to ensure we don't have a significant difference between male and female pay across our global business. Outside of compensation, we're really focused on, for our workforce, figuring out what resources they need to advance their careers, whether that looks like job structure flexibility, work hour flexibility, specific training, and then also really strong parent and care benefits to enable those women to stay in our workforce and want to work for us. I think it would, everyone joining today would have read or felt the experiences of how the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women and has exacerbated norms and stereotypes around gender roles for many. Our recent research that we've done has shown that nearly 50% of respondents are going to consider finding a new employer if flexible working preferences can't be met. And if I think about my history at Transurban and where we've been as a business, we've been really flexible for a long time. And I'm really proud that we've already had that flexible framework in place. In March 2020, we were able to transition the 90% of our workforce that could be remote within 1 week because we had already set up so many tools for our employees to be flexible. So for us, it's really about continuing how do we adapt and provide the flexibility to be able to achieve the outcomes our communities and government and customers are expecting from us. We're also, I think, equally as important, investing in the next generation. So in Australia, we have a signature program, Females Excelling in Engineering and Technology, or as abbreviated in Australia, FEAT program. And that was established in 2014 in Australia. And that program has advanced more than 90 women pursuing degrees in STEM. And that's a combination of providing one-on-one mentoring to them, as well as real-world access to our assets and roadways and leadership teams so they can really start to better understand and be interested in growing their careers in that direction. We also reached a financial close earlier this week on a project, which was very interestingly affected by what's going on in Ukraine, because the morning we launched our offerings into the market, the financial market, many of them were closed or really plummeting because of what was happening in the world. And just goes to show you how how connected we are as a world these days. But the project that we're starting this week with VADOT, which is very exciting, is led by all women. So I think when you have an approach, you can feel really assured that you can be making progress and you can start to see that traction. And I think that Transurban's been very deliberately focused on women in transportation for many years.
You know, when you mentioned that VDOT project here in Virginia being led by women, what kinds of positions are those women in?
A wide range. So the woman who's actually leading the construction oversight from our standpoint, so she's the project director in charge of the entire project, which would be overseeing the design builder who's doing the construction. We've got a commercial manager that's a female, finance leads. So it's a combination of both technical, managerial, and operational. It really kind of runs the spectrum for the project.
Wow, that is fantastic. I'll think of that next time I'm driving out there.
Yeah, great.
You know, when we look back, Pierce, at the last couple of years, you were approached to become president of the North American market. It was the middle of the pandemic, and you had just had a baby. You were at home with a newborn, and your global CEO was in Australia, multiple time zones away. That was a lot to juggle, I'm sure, but how did you do that? What was that like?
Well, certainly the phone call I got was a surprise. So as you just said, I was managing a newborn and two boys, one who was entirely remote virtual learning, when our global CEO called me to talk about this opportunity. And I think when I look back at it, he caught me at a rare moment where I had actually left the house by myself. I think I went to get a coffee or get my nails done or something. And in December 2020, there wasn't a lot of that happening, especially with what was going on in my house and around the world. And then after the surprise wore off, I really had some good conversations with our global CEO, my former boss, who was the one moving on to her great, fantastic next opportunity, as well as my husband, some family, and then a few girlfriends. And I think I kind of went through it. It was a pretty quick process, but when I went through it, it reminded me that my approach in my career, instead of focusing on what's my next role or where am I going, and this is my road to get there, I've just focused really on delivering strong outcomes for whoever I need to, whatever my stakeholder looks like, and then trying to solve and tackle difficult challenges. And that success has over time built a lot of trust. And as I mentioned, I've been with Transurban more than a decade. So I had moved around our organization, taking on several different kinds of roles across projects, business lines. And I think the experience in doing that and building relationships, working across the organization and understanding at a shallow level much of what we did, it really provided foundational experience for me to be considered a strong candidate for the president role. So also as moving around, both living in Australia and having jobs here and adding to our family, I had also learned to manage and set boundaries and then pivot, right? So there were times where I could say, I really can't take on this opportunity, or maybe now I'm ready to take on more. So in this context, I had to really think about, how could I take on this role and do right by our business, do right by my family, do right by myself, and really think about all of those things collectively. And as you mentioned, right, we're based out of Australia, so we have about 1,700 employees, and then if you add contractors and consultants, much larger, and about 170 of those are based in North America. So the vast majority of my colleagues are based in Australia. So for things like our board meetings or executive committees, we're talking about 3 different countries, 5 different markets, a 16-hour time difference sometimes. So it can be tricky, and it takes give from all sides, and sometimes a reorganization of just how you think about what a typical workday is. So for me, if we have an executive committee meeting or a board meeting, and that's going to start at 8 p.m., then I'm going to look at how I arrange my day to make sure that I get a couple of hours with my kids, or to do some exercise, or to just have a moment alone, so that I can really flex and be operating at my best when I'm in front of our board or executive committee. And I have the same thing, our colleagues in Australia, when we're trying to do a one-on-one meeting or get together and workshop something, some colleagues prefer to meet at 6:30 a.m. their time or 9 p.m. their time to flex to work on our time zone so that it works better for their personal lives. And there are lots of days and lots of roles where that isn't required in a business. But because of the distance, because we've had to work that way, we're very focused on outcomes. And because we can't always be in the same room at the same time, as a culture, we're focused on outcomes. We're not worried what hours people are working or when they're working. We want them to be productive and achieving outcomes. And that's our focus. And I think our flexibility, I think that's come some from our need because of being so physically far apart. And then we also do things, we try to make sure we're thinking about our flexibility. And in North America, a lot of people will do evening calls to work with our colleagues in Australia when they're waking up on the other side of the world. And so a couple of years ago, the company instituted policy just in North America, every 3 p.m. every Friday, we try to really shut it down. So for those people who have really had some later days, earlier in the week, or some evening calls, that they get that chance to rebalance and feel like they're empowered to be able to do those kinds of things. And it's not just summer hours anymore, it's really stuck, and it's been I think it's been great for everybody.
You were blazing these trails well before the pandemic. It's really nice to hear. What great management style. Pierce, I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to do something fun to close us out. Let's just do a really quick lightning round. I'll give you a quick prompt and you just give me like top of mind, whatever comes to your mind first.
Okay.
Sound fun? Okay. Because you know the road business so well, what is your favorite stretch of road?
I think my favorite stretch of road is the Sagamore Bridge in Massachusetts, because when I cross that bridge, I'm on Cape Cod headed towards Wellfleet, which is one of my favorite places.
Oh, that's always a nice last mile home, isn't it?
It is.
What's the best road trip ever?
Ooh, the best. Maybe in college when a few of us packed up in a car and drove out west to spend a summer in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Oh, that sounds fun. Best travel app?
This one could be a tie. So we as a company have developed something called GoToll, which I love because you can pay tolls on your mobile phone, which feels awesome. But I also really depend on Waze to get me around town and make sure I'm finding my most efficient route.
I love Waze too. Okay, last one. Working across the cultures between the United States and Australia, what's your favorite quirky Australianism?
So many great things about the Australian culture. One thing Australians or Aussies love to do is shorten words. So brekkie, short for breakfast, is one that we still use in my family today, even though we lived in Australia about 5 years ago. I just love some of the shortening of specific words.
That's so fun. Well, thank you, Pierce, for being here today. I learned a lot, and I certainly will never take roads for granted again. I can't wait to see more of the projects coming out of Transurban. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it, Carolyn. Thanks so much. What a great program you all are putting together.
Thank you so much.